This is the website, The Way, the Truth, and the Life. This is an introduction into understanding the genetic background of humans. It is November 21st, 2013, and I'm editing this first chapter as a foundation for mathematics. And the background of genetic behavior that today gives rise to four major categories of genetic inclination for social, political, academic philosophy and behavior. They have four, and there's the female genetics on one side, which gives rise to socialism, abortion, women's liberation, and they will align themselves with gay and lesbian, homosexual groups because they're not a threat to the women. And politically and academically, they will work together. On the opposite end is the Islamofascists, the dominant male genetics. And all of these genetics have to do with survival. Operationally, everything to me is what I call God. In God we live and move and have our being. And one of the primary biological laws is what survives is what propagates. If it doesn't propagate, genetically it doesn't survive. So we've got the women's liberation, feminist, homosexual, marriage type things here with the socialism, and nowadays in Kenmore, marriage is broken down because women used to use the church to use the priest against their husband, but they don't need that now. In Kenmore or New York, they can just call the police. Their husband hollers at them, it's a crime, have them thrown out. They don't need religious authority anymore. They've got the law behind them. And the socialism to provide for their needs. On the other extreme, the Islamofascists, that comes from the male, dominant male. These are part of what came out of the genetics. And in the middle, you've got the logical, rational foundation that evolved from civilization, and we'll get into that, where that foundation lies. And on the other hand, you have a strange group that I've had some very honorable friends that were members of it. They're very much against religion and against government. The men dominate their own homes, and their philosophy is anarchist. And explain these four foundations, genetic foundations for social, political philosophy and behavior. It's what survived. And you will find here is the myth of the noble savages. The inbreeding caused destruction. You can go back and look at the female chimpanzees wandered off. They didn't have babies from their own siblings. They'd go wandering off. They were attracted to the opposite and to the invader. They could be drawn off by a stranger. The same is true in human females. They're attracted to the invader because that's what survived. The dominant males the males working in a group to attack another tribe and kill the men, take their women. You'll see that on the hunter-gatherers, up to 60% of the men died by violence, and the main violence was attacking another tribe to get the young women, because when they had babies with those strange women, the babies were stronger genetically and tended to survive. The Eskimos would allow a male visitor coming through their sparsely populated area to sleep with their wife or daughter, just because they had such a problem with the genetic degeneration. So this millions of years of violence left a mark in the females of a attraction, resentment relationship with the male. Attracted because those that were attracted survived, a resentment because of the violence and subjection that females were subjected to. And the way this expresses itself is different in the great apes and in humans, because great apes don't have the cause-effect logic of verbal, logical awareness. The rape and the childbirth 8 months later are not associated with the male that did the rape. There's no sense of fatherhood in the males. They don't associate the child with their genetic rape behavior. But okay, so the dominant male was the one, and in many tribes, among monkeys, the dominant male, there's in India these monkeys that kill the other males that would compete with them. And there's even instances where in the monkeys, some of the males will kill the progeny of other males. One of those reasons is to stop the female from breastfeeding so she can again become pregnant. It's just a survival thing. It's genetics. It isn't that these monkeys are thinking cause-effect relationship. It's just natural behavior. This is really the Garden of Eden, just responding naturally to what survives. And so there you have the dominant male, but there's a whole bunch of other males that are not the dominant male. And there is a resentment of the overlords. The males want to dominate their own home, their own female, but they want anarchy. They don't want any government ruling over them. They want to be able to do whatever they want to do. It's a genetic disposition that many men have. And that anarchy is the political expression of this genetics. And then the fourth category of rational behavior and home building. Let's go back first. This hunter-gatherer, the great apes, both hemispheres of the cerebrum are copies. And the same for females. A female can have damage to one side of the brain and tend, with a stroke or whatever, tend to be more mobile and more able, where a man has more hemispheric specialization to work with logic. That's because the male groups had to plan the hunting, had to plan the war. The female humans take care of the babies is what survived. Take care of the day, take care of the feeding of the children. And they did that. They didn't kill their babies. The reason they didn't kill their babies is because they didn't associate the child with the rape. or the resentment of the male domination. Humans, the females, learned that. The human speech, verbal, logical, cause-effect relationship speech is maybe in the hundreds of thousands of years old. That there's some type of verbal communication and simple language, but has the cause-effect. If you do this, then this. And then the realization that the rape causes the pregnancy, and that as knowledge that can be passed on verbally. One ape might realize this, but they can't tell another ape. So that's a big difference between humans and the great apes, and why human women tend to resent their children, easily abort them, don't want to breastfeed them. Great apes breastfeeding to the second molars, which is equivalent to 5 or 6 years old. So we have the female genetics as a foundation, female women's liberation, which is destroying the home. We have the male dominant Islamofascism, which builds the male domination of the home. We have the anarchist, which is male dominated home, but resentment of the government. It ends up being socialist because there's no viable army formation to defend your freedoms. The anarchists under socialism have more freedom than they would under fascism. But and they want democracy. They're in control of they don't want a strong government. So those are the 4 areas, and the one that why one built up with family and home and family farm, the foundation of that with the hunter-gatherers, there's then the reason that the high cultural development in Northern Europe and among the Chinese, but with a special emphasis on Northern Europe, was the hunting of woolly mammoths, this wonderful source of meat, a couple of tons that had to work together. And then as there's evidence now, clear evidence, that the white race was in North America long before anybody else. They were hunting these mammoths, and when the mammoths were eradicated by overhunting and the climate change and the combination of these things, they immigrated back to Europe, where they could still hunt the woolly mammoth. This process of sailing also has its foundation in hauling this heavy meat. Number one, the mammoths ate an awful lot. That meant they were by the riverbeds where there was green grass, and so that was a primary hunting place and where they would go for water. But to be able to transport the meat, and the more sparsely populated they became, the further the group of men would have to travel to find one. And how do you get the meat back home? It wasn't tribes wandering, following them after they left Europe, or after they left North America. In Europe, you can find the mammoth bone homes where they sailed down the rivers to these areas where they could also have farming. And so you had this male group behavior, not dominant male to have sex with all the women, but male choosing a leader because that promoted their group effort, that they could work together. It had to do with respect. And out of this grew the Viking culture and the Goths that immigrated down into the home Christian areas of Ukraine and became very powerful family Christians. That's a history that is historically has been degraded as a heresy, and not much of it exists in the literature. I found one of the best references to early Christianity around the Black Sea from a Muslim professor in Turkey that discovered this information and published it. That those churches were founded by 3 of the original apostles, Peter and his wife, Paul and his companions, and I think it was Andrew, and I don't know whether his wife or another companion, but many of the apostles went with their wife or sister. But the home church, family love is a wonderful thing that grows in a part of the agricultural culture. It came in before the invasions in India and in China, the family farm and the working of the family together. Out of this grew caring, respect for elders, and the rich anthropculture, raising of human beings with a healthy background of behavior and able to build a healthy society. That happened in Northern Europe. With the Vikings, even the pagan Vikings, 1,000 years after or 800 years after the Goths, the Vikings were invading, coming down the rivers and invading in Ukraine. And when they left, the Russian lords invited them back because they had so much conflict, and the Vikings were honorable people in their rule. And the Vikings, the pagan Vikings, were invited by the decadent Byzantine Christian Empire. Decadent not because of Christianity, decadent because it was worldly Christianity and affluence, where the children were raised by wet nurses and babysitters, so that rather than being the loving, respectful, responsible children like farm family, they were narcissistic, sadomasochistic, no ability to care beyond themselves if they could care for themselves. That was the degeneration of the Byzantine Empire and the Roman Empire and the Greek Empire and the American Empire and the English Empire. Narcissism, and wherever Babylon, wherever affluence comes, the women, that part of that genetic resentment of hatred for the violence, of millions of years of violence they suffered at the hands of men, but attracted to them. That's the evil of it. The snake is a penis rape. That they're attracted to the very thing that they hate. It's a love-hate thing. That's because we now know there are many parts to the brain. We're not an entity, not a single thing. We're a whole bunch of things, and it depends which one is dominating. And you can send out a real nice one to be, oh, I'm so nice, and underneath is a monster come and grab you. But those are all parts of the brain. The physiological psychology has shown the psychobabble of Freud and that, not the multi-component looking at humans, but that you can find that common sense written in storytelling cultures way back. Important thing. Academics isn't developing healthy behavior. Book learning is different than the reality of working together in a family farm or something. Last summer I studied the Roma, the gypsies. They escaped the Islamic invasions of India. The genetics now show they were a warrior class in the Hindu lands, and they fought with their families and pushed off the land for a couple of generations, and then immigrated to Christian areas and traveled for 1,000 years. They used to come in their cart in Pennsylvania to my grandmother's, and then they'd come to the back door and she'd give them some food. They went through every year. They had their carts, and they were allowed to just exist, living in their wagons with horses and getting what they needed as they went along the way. In farm areas, Christian farm areas, it was safe. People had charity. They would give them work for the day, need help bringing in hay, whatever. And that culture, by the way, the Roma, the women didn't even put anything on their top because they breastfed their children to 5 and 6 years old. And at night, they all sat around the campfire and storytelling. Without a written language, that culture was healthy enough to thrive for 1,000 years without a written word, because there was family togetherness, daily working together, caring for one another, sharing with one another. But that also was the foundation of the church in Europe. Not the Catholic Church, but the early church emerged into many, morphed into many expressions, but the Amish are a later expression of this. I can't think of the heresy that the organized worldly church called them, but these Goths invaded and took over Italy. Surprised me, and it was the Goths that defeated the Muslims and pushed them Spain. But in the process of defeating the Muslims, they converted their warlords, converted the worldly Christianity for the honors and pompous and support that they would have from the church for their dominance. And that's where the groups came to form the Amish and the Mennonites, moved out of Europe to get away from the corruption of worldly Christianity, and then the corruption of that with the French Revolution, which was really women's liberation movement, the corruption of affluence, the narcissism. Look at me, look at my art, look at my dance, oh, like my instrument, how do you like it? Oh, me. And many couldn't even get that far. They were sadomasochistic, the tortures. And some of those sick people came to America as lords over the slaves. The slavery came from originally Muslims selling black people. They would take hundreds of thousands of them over into the Islamic areas in Pakistan and that, but they castrated all the males. They were there for slaves. That was the males mainly they took. They castrated them, but they sold to the Europeans, and that's where slavery got started. And the evil that I saw in South America, and when I was 15, the summer I hitchhiked to Arizona to visit a friend in the Air Force there at Davis Mountain Air Base, and on the way back I went down into Juarez, Mexico with 2 other hitchhikers and a man that was having home problems and left his wife for the weekend. At any rate, the shacks that they were living in, the corruption, the little boys coming, you F my sister, Trace. Where did that come from? The same thing goes on in Liberia. Terrible corruption of blacks on blacks. Where did that come from? Yes, the black slaves, originally it was set up by the Muslims, and they sold them into slavery. And then they were abused in America somewhere, and they were, many went back, they created Liberia. The capital of Liberia is named after President Monrovia. The Constitution for Liberia was written in America. It was freed slaves to create their own country. But they abuse, and a terrible abuse there. Because worse, Muslims aren't that cruel to Muslims, but when they ruled Spain, and with the Jews as their enforcers and rent collectors, and the domination of beheading and having to give their virgins to send to the harems in North Africa, all these things, once the Christian, quote, worldly Christians took power, and the upper class with their many sons, only the eldest son was given the property and title to not dilute the power of the family, and the others who were neglected by being raised by wet nurses and babysitters rather than a loving mother, they had, with their power of their family, they became priests and military officers, and went to South America and took this hate, resentment of being dominated to dominate another group in South America. It's all over South America. And the same thing of the slaves that were freed for Liberia. Terrible abuse. The same thing in Russia. It's harder to see because it's not black and white. There's a dominating class, which includes the Jews. I have a friend who says he's giving money to a charity for the poor Jews in Russia that are starving, and help them come to America. And here I'm in Russia right now, in my home, Russian home, and it's just not true. The Jews, the grandson of Freud. Just 2 weeks ago, one of his paintings went for $142 million, the most ever paid for a painting, and it's him, a painting of three faces of one of his homosexual partners, and the rumors is it was bought by one of the wealthy Russian Jews. There's more Jewish billionaires, more billionaires in Russia than any other country, and almost all of them are Jewish. The Jews were at the top of the communist ladder, and they took over and grabbed ownership when communism broke up. And that $142 million was reportedly paid by the Jew from Russia that owns that soccer team. But there's so many myths propagated. I have nothing against Jews, but they have been given a situation where they could thrive. They were the helpmates of the Muslims until England took the Holy Land away from the Muslims and let the Jews come back. You will find Orthodox Jews that hate the what do they call that? The Zionists who created this new Islamic State. The Jews were rescued by the Muslim Turkish sent ships to Spain to rescue them. The Jews were their enforcers, rent collectors, bookkeepers, their doctors. There's a history of that, and the Jews live peacefully throughout the Muslim world. That's why there's many of the Orthodox Jews resent the Zionists for destroying. They had a good life amongst the Muslims, and when the Muslims would invade a Christian area, they were always an enticement. But the Jews also were used by this corrupted upper class lords of the Goths they didn't want to train the serfs. They made the common people in subjection and needed rent collectors and record keepers, and they needed doctors. They didn't want their children to get their hands dirty with disease, but here were these intellectual Jews, intellectual in their brain because they'd learned to read, blah, 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 to preserve the law, and developed an abstract intellectualism that led to the insanity of liberalism. Michael Savage's book, Liberalism, It's a Mental Illness, there's insights into that's part of this. But I don't want to keep on going now. I also would like to include in this the myth of the noble savage. When my parents moved to New York to get work, my father got work in Niagara Falls, and we bought a home in a farm community just outside the Tuscarora Reservation. And you hear all this, how bad the white people are and how evil the Europeans were. That isn't what I experienced, and I wondered what's going on here. And come to find out, the Iroquois tribe were cannibals. And there was a neuter tribe around Niagara Falls, and in that area, called neuter there were French fur trappers and traders, and priests came with them. Not a military, not dominating, just living amongst the natives. They called this tribe the Neuters because they were neutral between the Iroquois and the Hurons. The Iroquois and Hurons were in constant warfare, but they would agreed to have peace in this area, and they would meet for annually in that area peacefully. But the priests came, like it says in Luke chapter 10, give up all and go. And they came. Two French priests working in this area and with the Hurons, and there were many accepting the love of Christ. And the Iroquois resented this and blamed them for the smallpox, that they were evil and bringing this evil curse of Christianity. The Iroquois took these two priests, tied them to posts, cut the lips and tongue off one who kept preaching Jesus. They cut the meat off of their legs and roasted it in front of them and ate it. And then the Iroquois went on to exterminate the neuter tribe. The Tuscarora Indian Reservation was neuter territory. They're a group of Iroquois related that were brought by the Iroquois and given this land. It's unbelievable. They murdered a whole tribe. And the bad white people, the bad Christian culture. It's insanity. If you look at the love of Christ grown out of family farm love, like Buddhism flourished in China in the family farm. The family farm gives peaceful, respectful people. Taoism and the desire for having a safe and secure place to raise a family and respect the elders. And again, the message from studying the Roma, it isn't book learning, it's family love. And just like here, we have a Sunday morning church. It's a family. We pray together when we get up in the morning, when we have meals 3 times a day, when we go to bed, that's 5 times a day. We're thankful for the gift of life. In God we live and move and have our being, and to do our best. We were thankful. We were predestined. Olga and I received enough love to be able to love, and we're caring for this 4.5-year-old now granddaughter, and fortunately her mother breastfed her for 4 years. And she's just got the wonderful spirit of a child that has been loved and disciplined. The respect and the learn God's laws. She says, well, where is God? God is everything. The wall here is made of God. One of God's laws, don't bang your head against the wall, you'll hurt yourself. We're in a 5-story high apartment building. Don't jump off the top of the building. God's laws will kill you. God's laws, and that's a message of Christ. It's better I go away, I'll send you the Spirit of truth that will teach you all things. That's true science, not the gobbledygook social political science that they're being taught in the Big Bang Theory magic, something out of nothing, or God's probability, or whatever, or the Bible says 6,000 years ago there couldn't have been dinosaurs, or some nonsense that you can get from biblical insanity or scientific insanity, where they take what the information is there and corrupt it and distort it. At any rate, this knowledge of the genetic foundation of the evil behind the social political processes and the breakdown of the home, that 4th category, the home with honorable men, the farm family, it's gone. It's all machines now. Russia is inviting back Amish and giving them property to try and build something of healthy anthropculture, human rearing, because it's so corrupted, an apartment dwelling. So that's my introduction to how important genetics is, and how our genetics are corrupted by God's law of what propagates is what survives. And how sad Hitler talked about genetics, and they were doing genetic engineering, but they didn't know what they were talking about and gave it a bad name. My uncle that had a mink ranch. The secret of being a successful mink rancher was choose the mothers well. By that he meant the ones that didn't have a good mother, make pelts out of them. It takes a good mother to make a good mother, and it takes a good father to raise a boy to be a good father and a good husband, to provide for his family. When I first had a family, a man could support his family on the income, normal income, but then along come the affirmative action that they had to hire women and minorities, whether they were qualified or not, and it cost so much to put all these people on the payroll. The productive people had to give up part of their salary to pay them, and it ends up no longer a man can support a family and keep his wife at home to care for the children, or it's very hard anyway. So these things are corrupting our future, and we need to wake up and choose our mothers well, and that a woman is liberated and wants to go and compete with men. Let her compete honestly and openly. That's her business. But get fixed so you don't make a baby and do that crime against humanity of depriving them of the mammalian nursing bond. If you look at autism, it is the lack of the mammalian nursing bond. Even a good mother, the one that in her mind wants to and stays home, has stress because she didn't receive that care herself to be able to give it. It's not intellectual. You can't learn it in a book. It's something received from a mother that received it from a mother that received it from a mother, brought up in a home, safe home, protected by a loving husband and father and community. And that's being erased. But there are still women who, the Amish, they don't have the problem with autism. It's a crime against humanity what's going on. Let's make it a crime to have children when you're not genetically, behaviorally able to give the child its basic needs. You're depriving them, and that's a crime against humanity, and it's going on more and more. Let's figure out a way to stop it. Let women have whatever they want to compete with men, but not to be mothers giving birth to a child that doesn't have that maternal nursing bond to bring them up that they can care. Thank you. Let me summarize here. What differentiated humans from their predecessors? What they have in common is what survive to propagate is what makes the genetics of their nature. And that male violence, competition amongst one another, and competition to rape the female is a common experience in many animals. And that gives a part of females that are both attracted, because those that have babies that are attracted to have babies and accept the rape, but it also leaves a resentment of the violence. So there's those two parts. We know in physiological psychology there are many parts to the brain, and that doesn't mean that that's the way they are all the time. Some women could kill a baby one time and love it the next time, because both parts are in the brain genetically, and culture brings out different behaviors. Anthropculture, the raising of human beings. So the great apes, by and large, breastfeed their infants until the second molars, which is equivalent to 5 or 6 years. And the reason that women don't want to is because women associate the resentment of the male with the child as its product, because the logic cause-effect relationship of verbal language, a mother can tell the daughter, he made that baby you're having. The rape made the baby. Animals can't carry on this knowledge of cause-effect relationships, so genetically the resentment of the male is not projected onto the progeny. Given that, the 4 groups that evolved out of this hunter-gatherer society, that and that genetically the warfare was necessary for healthy genetics, attacking another tribe to get their young women, kill the men, get the young women. And what gave that 4 different foundations for social, political, educational philosophy. 1, the socialism, female liberation, abort, murder, healthy fetuses, homosexual marriage. Homosexuals are not a threat to the females. Okay. Male dominant Islamofascism. And then the other males that resented the dominant male. Anarchism. They don't want government, but they'll dominate the female. But they don't want government or male domination over them. And the other is growing out of the groups that learned to sail and work together on one part for the Viking types, and then it became the Gothic Christians, farm home Christians out of the Black Sea, Christian home family Christian culture, and similar, the home and caring environment similar to the Buddhism in China, family farm and respect for elders. So we have those four groups. This family caring group gave rise to a higher anthropculture where caring was possible, and the care for the environment, care for the family. So that's the background of the genetics and my conclusion. This is the ending message. This is the website, The Way, the Truth, and the Life. These are the guest rooms in our 3 homes, New York, Florida, and Russia. They are prepared for those messengers that Jesus prayed for in Luke chapter 10. And he gave them the instructions. Reading from Luke chapter 10, verse 1. After these things the Lord appointed 70 other also, and sent them 2 by 2 before his face into every city and place whither he himself would come. As Jesus said in Matthew chapter 18, verse 20, where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am with them. Verse 2, therefore he said unto them, the harvest is great, but the laborers are few. Pray ye therefore the Lord of the harvest that he would send forth laborers into the harvest. This is Jesus praying for more servants and asking us to do the same. Verse 3, go your ways. Behold, I send you forth as lambs among wolves. Verse 4, carry neither purse nor scrip nor shoes, and salute no man on the way. Verse 5, and into whatsoever house ye enter, first say, peace be to this house. Verse 6, and if the Son of Peace be there, your peace shall rest upon it. If not, it shall return unto you again. Verse 7, and in the same house remain, eating and drinking such things as they give, for the laborer is worthy of his hire. Go not from house to house. Verse 8, and into whatsoever city ye enter, and they receive you, eat such things as they set before you. Verse 9, and heal the sick that are therein, and say to them, the kingdom of God has come nigh unto you. Verse 10, but into whatsoever city ye enter, and they receive you not, go your way out into the streets of the same, and say, verse 11, even the very dust of your city, which cleaves on us, we wipe off against you. Notwithstanding, be ye sure of this, that the kingdom of God has come nigh unto you. Verse 12, but I say unto you, it shall be more tolerable in that day for Sodom than for that city. In closing, remember Matthew 18, verse 20, where Jesus said, for where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there I am in the midst of them.